So we will start. Why don't we share graces since we haven't been together for 2 weeks? How about we share a grace that has taken place since we were last together?
Okay.
Take a moment. Think about something that happened at special grace.
I'm ready.
So this is Monica, and in another group that I'm in, we've talked about how in this COVID time where we're shut down and not able to participate in the world like we used to, it's difficult to find those things that you might expect to be called a grace. But one that I experienced that I call a grace is a video that my son sent to me of my little granddaughter giggling for the first time. Well, not the first time, but I mean, just really outwardly tickled because he was playing with her and she just kept giggling and giggling. You could tell she was having a lot of fun. And it was just a really sweet moment at the end. My son wrapped his arms around her and hugged her and everything. So I keep looking at that video over and over again because it just makes me giggle when I watch it, and I consider that a grace.
That sounds like a beautiful grace. Thank you, Monica.
We watched Midnight Mass from St. Cecilia's and had the joy of hearing our wonderful Archbishop Lucas give a homily. You know, just encouraging us to keep going and saying, you know, God is not surprised. God is not having a bad year. God is in charge. And it was just such an uplifting homily. It kind of set us on the right foot.
Thank you, Joan. That's beautiful.
This is just a little one, but it seemed big to me. And I just have this big issue with loneliness and being alone, and I just don't like it. And I just started this year really hoping that I wasn't going to be alone through the holiday season this year, but then, that didn't work out. But my kids have been here and they've been going back and forth between the other grandparents' house. But for New Year's Eve, I was going to be alone, and I was just really upset about that and just dreading it. But then at the last minute, Caleb came over and we just had the most wonderful evening. He is the most energetic, joyful person, and you cannot be bored and sad when you're with him because he never stops talking. He never stops having something funny to say. And we just had so much fun. And now we had so much fun. He's staying for another night, and he's just really fun. So that it was like a gift from God for him to just drop into my lap and be here with me.
How beautiful. Yeah, definitely. Thank you.
I'd like to share that my oldest daughter has been dating a young gentleman, and he's never been baptized. Doesn't know much about the faith, and he's been open to attending Mass with us. And we've been sharing videos with him from Father Mike Schmitz and Father Josh Johnson. And his heart is really on fire right now with Father Josh Johnson, and he ordered his book, Broken and Blessed. And he sent pictures from the book to my daughter today with highlighted passages, and just said that this father is really speaking to him and answering a lot of questions that he's had on his heart for a while.
Oh, definitely beautiful. Thank you.
I think for me, I just think of the craziness of our Christmas
Christmas Eve was super windy to the point that the hosts were flying out of the ciborium for the poor priests. They couldn't hang on to it. But yet the faith of the people that were there and so strong. And then to go Christmas Day, and it was total opposite. It was a beautiful day. It was hot, you know. But just to see the faith of people, I think is just a blessing that, you know, in the midst of this crazy year that we've had, people's strength is so strong.
Yeah, that is an interesting story. I can't imagine Jesus flying out of the ciborium. And sounds wonderful. Thank you. Any other graces anybody would like to share?
I just want to say that we found out that our youngest daughter, Teresa, is expecting, her and Javon, her husband, and we're just tickled pink, and it was like a Christmas gift to us, so
Wonderful. Thank you. Congratulations.
thank you.
I spent Christmas quarantined, so it was obviously not the best, and it was definitely different. But the grace that I'm receiving in it is just understanding it's really not what we do for God, it's really what we do with Him. And so just understanding, like, you know, I can be really busy or I can be really stuck. In a certain sense, like, you know, God does care about those things, but ultimately, like, His desire is to just be with us and to be with us in all moments, when we're busy, when we're not, when we're alone, when we're with others. And so anyway, that's just this grace that's unfolding in the midst of it all.
Thank you, Joan. I've had a couple of graces. I think one today that I'll share with you is we had snow here. This is probably our first snow in a long time. It's about 6 inches. And so I woke up at 4 a.m. With this chronic pain that I'm having with this COVID. And so I just chose to get up. And I was thinking, you know, I probably am not going to make it to the morning mass on the Solemnity of Mary. And so I just resigned myself to hoping to making it to an evening mass. And went and made my coffee and took this Aleve capsule, which really doesn't help me much. But I have to say, within 20 minutes, the pain was completely gone. And so I immediately knew that it was a God-given gift, that He wanted me to get to Mass early and to be without discomfort. First morning that I haven't had major discomfort in a week or two. And so it was just wonderful. So, you know, it was just a beautiful time for me to spend at Mass. And while I was there, this lady who walks with a cane, I see her at Mass at 6:30 when I go. She and I sometimes will share a pew. She's a little older than I am. And she came over to me and I went to get up to get out of her way. And she said, no, she said, I just wanted to tell you, I noticed that I hadn't seen you at Mass. And she says, I wanted you to know that I was praying for you every day, because people don't realize that we notice them when people are missing. And so I was like, wow, I never really thought that anybody would miss me. And so she was also a very loving soul here at our church. So a couple of graces this morning, just real beautiful. I was kind of hoping to have some New York people. I have an icon from St. Mary Major in Rome, and I was kind of hoping to have some New York people that have been in St. Mary Major. But we can go ahead and get started with the PowerPoint if you like. So I have this title here, let us make him a help unlike himself. And what you see here is one of my favorite icons, Our Lady of Vladimir. So do you have control of it, Joan, that you can, next slide? And so St. Luke is considered the father of iconography. There are 4 icons attributed to St. Luke. If you aren't aware, that he was a physician and also a doctor, and he is considered the father of iconography. And we can go to the next slide. And so these are the 4 images that are attributed to St. Luke. Our Lady of Vladimir is this one on the left. And the one next to that, Our Lady of Częstochowa, which is in Poland. And the one next to that, Our Lady of Perpetual Help. And of course, the one next to that sits in St. Mary Major Basilica in Rome, Our Lady of Patroness as protector of the Roman people. So Our Lady of Vladimir, it was transferred from Constantinople. This particular image is probably one of my favorites. It was transferred from Constantinople to Vladimir in 1115 and remains one of the most popular images and holy images. It was taken from a church in Moscow. I'm not sure when, but it now sits in a museum in Moscow. It has been retouched up and repainted many times over, so I'm not sure if it's an original of St. Luke. You can tell by looking at it that it is several paint coming off, and several gold also is also coming off. You'll notice here on the top that Mary has a star, and also she has a star on her left shoulder and also on her right shoulder. And those little stars are to signify her perpetual virginity before, during, and after the birth of Christ. Our Lady of Częstochowa relates to around 4th century. St. Helena, and St. Helena has been instrumental in preserving a lot of the historical landmarks and pilgrimage places in Jerusalem and the Holy Land. And many she brought back, and many of them are in churches, probably mostly in Italy, and also other Catholic churches. But she has preserved a lot of the history, the stories of Christ. And so in the 4th century, she discovered this image, Our Lady of Częstochowa. It was painted by St. Luke and on a tabletop made by Jesus. So the tabletop was of cedar, and it is said that St. Luke took that tabletop and painted it, the image upon that tabletop. She gave it to Constantine, and it ended up in Constantinople. After that, the image went to Charlemagne, who gave it to Prince Leo of Ruthenia. And by the 4th century, the image was transferred to Jasna Góra in Poland in response to a request from Prince Ladislaus, and remains there to this day. This is the image that I believe was in Pope John Paul II's chapel while he was Pope. And after he died, it was returned back to Poland. Our Lady of Perpetual Help, this particular icon is a replica of the original. The original was stolen out of a church, and so this particular icon is a replica of that one. It image in Constantinople. The story explains how the image was later enshrined in Crete. A thief stole the miraculous image from a monastery, bringing it to Rome in the 15th century. So this particular icon came around from about the 11th century and now resides in the church in Rome of St. Alphonsus Liguori in Rome. And this is the one that sits in St. Mary Major. It is the protectress of the Roman people, Our Lady of Protectiness of the Roman people. If you look at the faded colors, you can kind of tell that this is a very old icon, much like Our Lady of Czestochowa, so it more than likely could be perhaps original. Egg tempera will last a very, 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 very long time, and it hasn't been repainted over. It looks very original. St. Helena, and taken first to Constantinople by the 6th century, the image was transferred to Rome, and ever since it has been enshrined in the Church of St. Mary Major. It is the image known as Protectress of the Roman people, and it's the one that many popes, including Pope Francis, will place flowers and pray offering protection when he travels. This particular icon, St. Gregory I walked through the streets with this particular icon in about the 5th century, looking for protection from the plague that was plaguing Rome. And after he took that image and walked through the streets, the plague went away. And I believe Pope Francis did the same thing. He took this image and took it through the streets with COVID, I believe, as well, looking for it to be banished. This particular one, if you notice Our Lady's eyes, she's kind of looking away because she's looking at the Roman people, and she's inviting them to look at her son. So what is an icon? It is an interior presence of light. And so when you look upon an icon, you are to look at the glory of a transfigured Christ. So the facial image is all about a relationship of communion. And that's why they're considered very prayerful. Most icons have very small lips. They'll have very large eyes and a large head. So I have two images here, pictures of Mary. The one on the right is Our Lady of Vladimir, and I did cut her head off a little bit. But if you notice, her head is well rounded. Also, the neck will be full along with the neck of Christ. There's a fullness there, which is depiction of the fullness of grace. You notice here the stars on her head and on her shoulders. Her lips are small because Mary pondered everything in her heart and she said very little. So all of your icons will have small lips because little is said. Most of them are very wise, which is the fullness of the head, and they ponder things before they speak. Their eyes are very large as an invitation. And in this particular icon, Mary looks one eye at you, and in the other eye, she's carefully looking over her son, has an eye on her son. As opposed to this very worldly image, this one on the left, our diocese chose to make this our stewardship card icon. And I don't know who did this, but I was kind of appalled by the image. If you notice here, the lips are very large, very worldly looking, kind of a distraction. The eyes are not making contact with the person looking upon it, rather they're looking away. Her head is flat topped, so there's no fullness of grace depicted here at all. And so you can see the two differences. And I would just be curious as to ask, what do people think of the two images? So icons are very simple. The light source comes from within. The lines move toward a person. So if you're looking at an icon, the objects are coming towards you because you are to be as if in the same presence. And the goal is to be in a deep awareness of the divine. So colors, gold is all about sanctity. So most icons, you see Mary has a lot of gold around her. She has gold bands, gold stars. Jesus also has gold on his garment. Red is blood and life and humanity. So often the inner garment of Mary is red along with the inner garment of Christ. Orange, red, and green. So orange red is spiritual purification. A lot of times Jesus' garment will be orange red. Purple is a sign of royalty. Blue, heaven, mystery, purity, and the mystical life. So Mary pondered many things in her heart, and her outer garment, and on this particular one it looks black, but it is not black. There is no black in an icon. It's considered demonic. So this particular, it's black because of all the prayer candles, and the candle soot has turned it's an indigo blue. And so it makes it look black, but it's not black. It's indigo blue. And also Christ's outer garment is also blue. It's more of a royal blue. Green, if Christ is not in this red orange, he sometimes is in a green garment, which means youth and freshness. White is purity, and so as an infant, a lot of times Christ will be in white. And of course, brown is earthly and the life of poverty. So sometimes the inner garment of Mary will be kind of a reddish brown in color. So I thought this would be a nice time to break and do a little bit of an explosive gospel. So we'll just kind of focus on the gaze of love, meditation, and contemplation. It is the moment to contemplate and meditate on the text. We do this in order to gather the maximum love that Christ through his word wants to give. Look with love at the word, and the word will look back at you in love. And so who would like to read today's gospel reading?
I can.
Sounds good. Please do.
Luke 2:16 through 21. So they went with haste and found Mary and Joseph and the child lying in the manger. When they saw this child, and all who heard it were amazed at what the shepherds told them. But Mary treasured all these words and pondered them in her heart. The shepherds returned, glorifying and praising God for all they had heard and seen, as it had been told them. After 8 days had passed, it was time to circumcise the child, and he was called Jesus, the name given by the angel before he was conceived in the womb.
So take a few moments to pray with this gospel. And is there any word or phrase that maybe spoke to your heart? Look with love at the Word, and the Word will look back at you with love.
This is Monica. And the part where it says that the shepherds returning, glorifying and praising God for all they had heard and seen. And it makes me think that the shepherds were paying attention to everything that they had taken in. And so that's why they were glorifying and praising God, because it seems to me that normally people would be fearful and like, this is crazy, and and questioning and everything. But instead, their response was glorifying and praising. And I think it's because they were paying attention and were aware of God's love, and that this was something beyond their understanding, but wonderful, glorious, and good. And that's why they walked away glorifying and praising everything that they did. That was it.
Thank you, Monica.
For me, it was the very first line. So they went with haste and found Mary and Joseph and the child lying in the manger. And for me, there's been so much that's happened in my family this year, besides all the COVID and everything, with my dad's illness and having to put my parents into assisted living. And my brothers can be so hard to deal with. And it's so hard to make such important decisions when it's hard to communicate with the people you're making the decisions with. And there's even more decisions coming up. But I feel like the message I got was that the Holy Family is saying, just come with haste, just hurry to us, just come to us right now as fast as you can, and you're going to find us right here. This is where you need to be. Just hurry up, just come here to us, because we're here for you, and you can just be here with us, and we're waiting for you, so hurry up.
Thank you. Anyone else like to share?
I was struck by went with haste too. Just even before Carol started to read it, I saw that phrase and it jumped off the page. And I think it's because one of the reasons why is because when you're disabled or when you have a hard time getting around, you don't do very much with haste. You kind of are constrained by your physical body, but in your spirit, you don't have to be constrained at all. You can just zero in on what you want to zero in on without any constraints. And so when we shy away from prayer or don't take time in prayer, we're missing out on that. So God was inviting me to go with haste in prayer.
Beautiful. Thank you. For me, it was the name given by the angel before he was conceived. And I have to say, it was kind of because I created this PowerPoint and it was all about what happened before he was conceived. So it was a bit of a distraction for me to, hard for me to focus. The name given by the angel before he was conceived in the womb. And so we will kind of proceed on to the other half of the PowerPoint, unless somebody has something else to share. So there's two truths of Mary. Her her divine maturity and fullness of grace. So if you go back to Luke 11:27, we can hear the woman say, you know, blessed is the mother that gave you birth and nursed you. And Jesus responds in Luke 11:28, better yet, blessed are those who hear the word of God and keep it. So this really, I always struggled with this passage until I did this PowerPoint, and it became very clear that Mary could have always said no, but she didn't. She proceeded. Her fiat really it's because of her fiat that Christ was incarnate and came into our world. And so really kind of have to really focus on that as a big thank you. So trust and believe, hearing the word of God and believing. If we look at Saint Elizabeth, blessed art thou that hast believed, because those things shall be accomplished which were spoken to thee by the Lord. And so her consent was supernatural, which was in contrast to Zechariah, who did not believe and, of course, lost his voice temporarily. So why the incarnation? Well, if you recall, Adam and Eve's sin was permitted, and God allowed it because there was a greater good. Where sin abounded, grace might more abound. So God willed the redemptive incarnation for the sake of the regeneration of souls. So, you know, in a way, sinning is necessarily an opportunity for the human soul to grow in holiness. And so that's one of the beauties about this passage. I'm trying to think of the, if no sin, then no incarnation. So where sin abounded, grace abounded all the more. So it allows the human soul to really grow in holiness and to knowing themselves. And it really speaks volumes about the spiritual life. So it was planned. We know that from Genesis 3:15, the divine maternity by God. The fullness of grace, increase in charity, a higher degree of purity and holiness. It was necessary since the Mother of God had to be the most pure. And so I want to read a passage from 2 Samuel. And this particular passage, I've always, you know, when I argue about how Mary had to be free of original sin, I think of this particular passage. And I'll read it to you, and I'll share it with you. And I would love to have a little bit of a discussion on it. So Samuel 6. Let's see. Well, that's not 6 through 8. Second Samuel. So when they came to the threshing floor, Uzziah put out his hand to the ark of God and took a hold of it, for the oxen stumbled. And the anger of the Lord was kindled against Uzziah, and God smote him there because he put forth his hand to the ark. and he died there beside the ark of God. So here we have a man who had the stain of original sin, and he touched the ark, the holder of God. And of course, he was struck down by the Lord. So what happened, it kind of, to me, speaks volumes about how the holder of God had to be somebody free from the stain of original sin, had to be totally pure and holy. And it was needed, fullness of grace, to make her worthy to be the mother of God, and allowed her to be free from the stain of original sin. Pope Pius writes, from the beginning and before all ages, God selected and prepared for his only Son, the mother whom, having taken flesh, that he would be born in blessed fullness of time. And Proverbs, the Lord possessed me in the beginning of his ways, before he made anything from the beginning. I was set up from eternity and of old, before the part was made. So Mary is related to the Word. So the hypostatic union or hypostatic order, Mary is related to the Word made flesh, relationship of nature and of the entire Trinity.
What does
So
that word hypostatic mean?
it means one and the same. So together. I believe, Joan, do you have anything to add? So they both share in the same nature. So you, because Jesus was a part of Mary, and you women who are mothers probably can relate to this more than anything. I read somewhere where the mother carries the DNA of all her children within herself. And so that's kind of, Christ is of the same nature as Mary. Of course, his other nature is divine. He does not share. Mary, of course, isn't divine, but the natural part of her he shares with. Does that make sense? Okay.
Right. It's basically the reason why we're celebrating this feast day, that we understand that Jesus became a man, but was always and is God as well. So, and he is divine and human.
Okay. Can you? So, and because of that, because she had this God man within her womb, she also shared the entire Trinitarian relationship as well. So you can imagine how beautiful that was for her. It cannot be lost. God gave the Son the divine nature, Mary gave him human nature, and of course, subject to pain and death in order to redeem us. So the divine masterpiece, the good of the grace of one soul is greater than the good of the nature of the whole universe. So Mary's fullness of grace surpassed that of the angels in order to become Mother of God, perfectly preserved and in harmony of higher and lower faculties. So she really essentially was much like Eve. So she did not have the stain of original sin. She was totally in control of her higher and lower faculties. She had the sureness of mind and strength of the will. She had concupiscence and darkness of understanding. Her body didn't weigh down her mind, but served it. So she was really totally control of everything. And so she was really, truly a saint, really, just beautifully made. And it enabled her to utter her fiat without reservation, despite knowing that his sufferings that were foretold in Scripture. So Mary, at the very young age, we're not sure how old. I've heard young as 3. I've heard as young as 5, was given up to the temple her parents were not allowed to raise her because the Jewish people were anticipating that there would be a woman who would be the mother of God. And so any Jewish family who anticipated their daughter could be this mother had to give their daughter up for the temple to raise them. So she basically was raised in the temple and was taught in the scriptures. And so you can imagine how hard that had to be for her parents. But it also protected her in a lot of ways. So you can see how God, you know, I seriously doubt if she ever got to see her parents again. So you can see how God protected her by having her in the temple. She got to learn and grow in holiness by being here in the temple. And so surround him with the utmost devotion. So while Jesus was being raised, she was really a greatest teacher for him, especially in his youth. And most heroically uttered her second fiat at the foot of the cross. So she knew the scriptures. She knew that the Messiah was going to be crucified. As a new mother, I imagine that was lost in the joy of motherhood. Not having children, I don't know, but all of you who are mothers can probably relate. But as time went on, especially if you think about the reading last week where he was lost in the temple, she pondered everything in her heart, and it probably started coming back to her. So we can go on. Okay. That's all I have. Any questions? Anything you want to share?
I want you to do more presentations on icons. Thank you for like the key of like the colors mean this, the shapes mean this, the size of people's lips mean this. That was really cool. I'll be able to look at icons now and be like, this is what it's telling me.
Yeah. Well, that image that our diocese chose, I have to tell you, I wouldn't even pick up the card. Usually I pick up the card because it's a very pretty image. That image they chose, I just thought was hideous. Even though it was supposed to be Mary, I thought, I don't know who painted this, but I think it's just a very poor image. It's a very worldly image. It's a very distracting image. You're kind of, you're totally distracted by it. It doesn't really draw you into the divinity of the image at all. And so I hope that you can see that. I don't know.
It was a good teaching tool, however.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you, Teresa, because I didn't understand icons either. And so that just kind of opened it up, and it made me understand, like, why is the head so large? And like, why is, are the lips, so small? And so it really, and it makes me think that perhaps whoever selected that other icon for your parish doesn't really understand iconography, right? So,
right. Absolutely.
And then that gospel line that you had, and Mary kept all these things in her heart. That's what you see in that icon, in those icons, is that just the fullness in her neck. Like she's just holding on to it. She's just savoring all those things.
Right. And full of grace. I mean, so that it doesn't mean she's got edema. When I first looked at icons, I thought, why is her neck so full? She got edema or something. It isn't that she's got edema. It's just she's fullness of grace. And so,
yeah. Beautiful. Thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah, Elizabeth.
So for me, through the whole thing, when you put those images up, it was the Mary, Mother of God. It was all about Jesus's eyes. They were just looking at his mother. They were just like round and bright and looking at her. And it was like this message like, okay, look to my mother, everybody.
Right.
Look to my mother, and just the love or something in his eyes. They just popped out of that icon and out of all of them. That was, to me, the most astounding thing.
Oh, you must be talking about Our Lady of Vladimir.
Oh, whatever the first one was on the far left.
Yeah, I think that's Our Lady of Vladimir. That's my fave. He's also got his hand wrapped around her neck. Yeah, Our Lady.
Yeah.
He's also got his hand wrapped around her neck. He can't get close enough to her. He just wants so much to be a part of her, and she is a part of him. They share in this very special human nature. Now, remember, she is not God, but she sure held him within her new. So the human side of him is Mary, and so they do share something very close, and so just very beautiful. And this icon to me just speaks volumes. This one does also, but it's newer. This painting, you can see the fullness here. It doesn't show so much here. This one particularly, you can see more of the Mary is protecting him from the angels have the swords and the wounds of his crucifixion. And so it kind of frightens him, and Mary's protecting him from that. So this one I always struggle with a little bit, but this one just speaks of this divine love. And she's inviting us to that love and wants us to know him. And so when you look upon this image, it really should speak volumes about being in the divine presence. And most of them are very simple. They're very, shouldn't be distracted with a lot of things. It's all about when you see and look upon an icon, it's to be in the divine presence. And if you go into a Russian Orthodox home, oftentimes they will have an icon corner, a prayer corner. And if you go into a home with a prayer corner, you are expected to go into that home and say a prayer before the icon, before you even start a conversation. So, those are very special places. And I encourage everybody to have a little icon prayer corner that you can just sit and pray before the presence and the Mother of God. I was kind of hoping to have somebody that's been in the Basilica of St. Mary Major. I've been in there once, and I don't recall seeing the icon of the protectiveness of St. Mary, of the Roman people. But we don't have anybody from who's been in there more than once, probably. So I don't know. Joan, you have never been there, okay?
I have no knowledge of it though, so we'll ask them next time.
So St. Mary Major, I believe, is where our Pro Sanctity movement got started, correct? And Bishop Jaquinta has a plaque in there, and so I thought that ironic that this icon.
Oh no, that's Our Lady of the Mountains, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a much smaller parish in Rome, but yes.
Okay.
John, are there any icons where Mary is actually smiling? The one thought that I had is they all look so somber. Maybe that's part of the point, but
yeah, it's not. And it is to contemplate. She pondered all of these things. So I don't believe any true icon will have a smiling. Our Lady of Tenderness may have, but again, they don't want you to be drawn to the lips. They want you to focus on the eyes. The eyes are the windows to the soul. So, and I think that's primarily why you don't see a smiling Mary. Her life, she's told one of the saints that she says, I suffered a lot in my life. And, reading the scriptures of the last week or two, you think of poor Mary probably going into labor on the donkey on the way to Bethlehem, and then having to deliver in a stable, and then having to rush out in the middle of the night out of Egypt. I mean, so there was a lot of roughness there. And so that's kind of too, even though but she has an inner, hopefully there's this inner joy and inner peace that, we've all been going through a rough year. You think of COVID and how it's just been really shook everybody up, and it's had to force us into routines we're not used to. And but to be in the presence of God and to be at peace, you should have this inner peace and this inner quietness that everything will be okay. And so that's kind of what an icon. She's not smiling, but she's at peace. Her soul is at peace. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Thank you, Teresa. Any other questions? Okay. Well, we can close together and say glory be to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit, as it was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be, world without end. Amen. O Immaculate Heart of Mary, true model of
Give
give
trust.
to the Son saints, Bishop